Excited about this webinar. Uh, Hello and good afternoon. My name is Kuntil Barwa, and today we have a very exciting webinar. I'm excited about it. It's Durga Puja through the eyes of a non-Bengali. Durga Puja is starting in the next 2 days. Of course, the excitement is less because of COVID, but still it's starting October 22nd. And to tell us more about Durga Puja, we have a non-Bengali with us. We have Seema Srivastav, who is born in Banaras and bred in Delhi. And Seema is an art historian and cultural theorist, teacher, and designer. She is qualified with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in the University of Delhi and an MA and MPhil from the National Museum Institute of New Delhi. Seema has been supporting us. She has been supporting us a lot in this initiative. Uh, and she conducts walks, museum tours, and special events in collaboration with and for prime travel companies. Over to you, Seema. Tell us a story about why you love Durga Puja despite being a non-Bengali.
Um, Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Kuntil. It's always a pleasure to be with all of you, and it's very, very interesting because I never thought in my life that I would be able to get an opportunity to come and live in Calcutta or Kolkata as it's known now. And it was like love at first sight. One has grown up in Delhi. I was born in Banaras, as Kuntil just mentioned. And my association with the puja was very different and unique in Banaras. And when I moved to Delhi, it was again very different. As I was growing up, of course, with a lot of friends who were Bengalis or Assamese or from the Northeast, we did visit the Chitranjan Park in Delhi or even the local pujas, and we saw the amazing images of the Durga. But I had very little idea about, you know, the lot of the vast kind of um, ceremonies and rituals, because they were very different in my household. And it is very interesting that just about 4 or 5 years ago, and of course 20 years ago also, my husband got a job in Calcutta and we had to move here. And it's
Seema, sorry to interrupt you. I'm turning off my video just to save some bandwidth. Yeah.
and I will as soon as we start our slideshow.
Yeah.
So the thing was that when I came to Calcutta, I got very intrigued because I was here once during the Durga Puja. And I started traveling to the north part of Kolkata, where the quarters were. And I went and visited a lot of these old homes where the traditional puja was performed. And I got quite intrigued with it. And so I think I also started realizing that how different it was. The only thing that I have great memories, and as the slide says, definitely this webinar is dedicated to my mother, of course, the Durga, the mother for all of us, but my mother, who told me such wonderful stories as I grew up. And I think that's been my closest and intimate connection that I built. And then being here and then going back to Banaras, traveling into Gujarat or having gone to Himachal, I realized that, or even down south, puja is celebrated everywhere with the same kind of energy. But of course, a lot of storytelling, a lot of local narratives, or even icons and symbols keep going through transformations in spite of a similar kind of background to it. So today I intend to just share a little of what I know. I don't claim to be an expert at it. I just want to tell you things which I have learned and I would love to share. It's part of a time when we should celebrate things together. So at this point, I think we'll start with our first slide. And I think Kuntil is going to help me with that. Yeah. So this image, of course, might ring a bell to many of you. Calendar art is full of these. You go into shops selling images and you see a lot of them, especially in North. you notice this kind of an image. By the way, with no offense meant, I will not be sort of highlighting north, south, east, west in a specific particular, highlight. I just want to show you a lot of imagery. This is the one I sort of grew up with. And at home, we had this large image of Durga like this. And we came to know how important it was to think of her as a warrior goddess. So Navratri is, of course, as all of you know, a festival celebrated in all parts of the country dedicated to Durga, the mythical mother goddess and the protector of the universe. Celebrated for 9 days. That is why sometimes it's known as Navratri or Navratri, because it means the 9 nights and days which are observed across the regions in India. It's, of course, the ceremonial worship of the mother goddess. And apart from being a religious festival for the Hindus, and I think this is very important, and I like to start with that, it's a time of reunion, rejuvenation, and celebration of many traditional cultures and customs. And the best part, in spite of being religious in the sense it's a Hindu festival, I think it's wonderfully inclusive in energy, spirit, and resilience. So as you can see, she's riding the lion here. Lots of terms written, which I'll just explain to you as we go to the next slide, please. This is the goddess sometimes tends to confuse us. And we do get confused because we see so many images of her. If you look into any calendar art, or you look into imagery when it's written Durga, Shakti, Parvati, Uma, Kali, and the names go up to maybe hundreds or 200s. And one wonders, is Chandi the same as Sati? So to begin with, there was a question which I always used to ask my mother. Who is Durga and who is Shakti? And she always told me that yes, they are two words, but they can be interchanged for the mother goddess. They are just different aspects of power. And what is interesting is that Shakti, of course, is the power from within us, while Durga is a power that originates from outside and stands like a fortress, invincible, just like a word Durg, which we use for a fortress. But here we see two wonderful images. And the left, of course, is the famous Sati. And, of course, there are many, many stories that one can read about the goddess throughout one's life. But there are a few stories that I definitely would like you to know. The one on the left side, you see Shiva lifting up a sort of dead woman. I mean, that's sort of crass, but that is actually the point. When the daughter of Daksha, who was disapproved by marriage because she wanted to marry Shiva, and Daksha was very upset about it. Well, but he had to actually give in to the marriage. But then he performed a ritual at home, in which, of course, Shiva was not invited. Now, Uma, of course, who is Shiva's wife, she comes, but she is absolutely upset, and she is fuming with anger for having been insulted by her father. And so she jumps into the fire. And in a way, actually, her death is what makes Shiva mad with grief. And Shiva then picks up her lifeless body. And then, as he sorts of starts the destruction, he uses the discus, and that sort of goes flying around, cutting Sati's body into 51 parts. Now, this is just the gist of the story, and this is what fell in different 51 parts of the country, from the big toe, and that is one of them is in Calcutta, which is the Kali Ghat temple, which has the big toe of the left foot of Uma. Now, this is very interesting. She's referred to as Sati over here. And when I went to Kali Ghat, I didn't know that it was the big toe of her left foot which was there. But on the right side, you see the ferocious form known as Kali. And I think this is one of those forms which also gives us a great idea of the goddess's role right from the time of the tribal or the folk cultures before she really is seen into the texts. And here she's again shown as the one who destroys. And this, of course, this image went on to becoming a very important part of the tantric culture. And as you can see, it's very ferocious. And she's actually got a foot on Shiva, who lies down there, and we know the symbols are there. And of course, there are many symbols which iconographically tell us about these different images. Can we go to the next, please? This, of course, is one of the most calmest form, I would say, as the daughter of Parvati and Manmenika referred to as Parvati. Now, please remember a lot of these names are similar, whether it's Uma and Parvati, they're sort of, but she here becomes somewhat an amorous tamer of the wild Shiva. Shiva has always been considered much more a bohemian and a wild. In fact, they say Shiva was very temperamental, temper sometimes and mental sometimes. And I think that is one of the interesting parts of this image, is that nicely married, happy married life of the goddess up in the mountains at Mount Kailash. Next, please. But these are the ones which we will really think of when we think of the image of Mahishasur Mardani. And this is where I would like to just give you a little idea about the story. I'm sure many of you know the story of her multi-dimensional quality that comes here. And the story, of course, is taken from the Markandeya Puran, which is observed in Bengal, which is the part of the Chandi section. Now, those are, of course, the literary details. But the story is, of course, there was a fierce battle of Durga with Mahishasur, who was, of course, the demon who, according to the narrative of the Devi Mahatmya, actually does penance. And he is given this power that he could, he was named Mahishasur, of course, but he became a sort of unleashed when he came and created terror on earth, heaven, and the netherworlds. And he would not be defeated because he had the power that nobody could kill him, neither a man nor an animal. I don't think he fathomed the fact that a woman of multitude power could kill him. But now, because this became a serious threat for the gods, and he prevented them from performing religious ceremonies and everything. In despondency, the gods gathered together and they asked Vishnu for help. Now, Vishnu, of course, is the protector, and he decided that they would create a goddess. So Durga actually is the created new goddess who was given different kinds of weapons. She was given even her body. It was Shiva's face, Yama's black wavy hair, Vishnu's strong and glorious arms, while Chandra gave her the curvaceous breasts. Indra gives her the loins, and Varun gives her the thighs. Brahma gives her the mighty hips, while Surya gives her the powerful feet. And Kuber adds on to the nimble toes, and of course, Ashtabasu giving her the 8 of her cardinal directions in which she is going to use these nimble figures of power. Now, this is exactly what happens. And then come the secondary level of Prajapati giving her the robust teeth, which she will require at the time when she'll go demonic. And of course, Agni giving her the 3 eyes, and Sandhya giving eyebrows, and Vayu giving the acute ears. And then come the weapons. Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. And you can see her with all her weapons: trident, discus, bow, arrow, mace, fierce sickle, protective shield, the tail of the serpent, and the spike of thunder, and of course her beautiful complexion. And that is how it is then that she comes on to killing Mahishasur. Now, Mahishasur, of course, has this power of transformation, which goes on for many, many days. And it is only on the 9th day that he finally comes as Mahishasur, the buffalo demon. And she manages to kill. And that is when we have Vijay Dashmi, or the day when she becomes victorious. Now, this is, of course, the story which is popular in the eastern part of the country. Now, not that we don't know this story in the north, but this is the most celebrated version of the story, which is in the eastern part. But there are many other stories in different parts of the country which are also celebrated in regions. Next, please. Yes, this is a very interesting imagery which shows us the different forms. And I must tell you over here that what is interesting is these are just the 9 of her incarnations: Shailputri, Brahmacharini, Chandraghanta, Kushmanda, Skandmata, Katyayani, Kalratri, Mahagauri, Siddhatri. And it's interesting that these stories are very beautiful, not one but many. And so for that, of course, will require a lot more time, and I cannot go into that kind of detail. So what happens is that every day of the 8 days is dedicated to one of these particular goddesses. And then, of course, there are uh, chants, and there are praises of the goddesses, this particular form. And also, apart from this, there are many other incarnations. Please remember, there are many more incarnations and many more names, and each added on with new stories. Also, at this point, I would like to tell you that we are celebrating Durga Puja right now at this particular time of the year. But it is 5 times in the year when Durga Ashtami is actually celebrated. And you must be wondering, oh, really? In fact, in the north, and I remember my mother doing it twice a year, once in springtime and one at this particular time, which are actually the most popular. But those who are real Shakta Bhats, as we call them, or the followers of this particular aspect of reverence, which is to the goddess, some of them actually, uh, you know, pray to her 5 times in the whole year for 10 days or 9 days. And so these are many different kinds of aspects of her. Next, please. Yes, this is the one which is quite dear in my family, and I remember the celebration of this. But I think this story needs to be told to you before anything else, because I think this is the reason that Durga Puja started being celebrated at this particular time, which is right now. And the reason is this one: when we see invocation of Durga by Rama, there's Ram and Lakshman and Hanuman. This is what brings us the term Akal Bodhan. And this is very, very interesting because the story is from the Ramayana. And uh, Akal is actually a very, very odd kind of timing. An invocation, of course, this whole thing of Bodhan to Durga. Now, in the Ramayana, it says that, Ram had to, of course, rescue his abducted wife Sita from the grip of Ravan, the king of the demons in Lanka. Now, before starting for his battle with Ravan, Ram wanted the blessing of the Devi Durga. He came to know that the goddess would be pleased only if she is worshipped with 108 blue lotuses. Now, after traveling far-flung places, Ram is able to collect 107 of these lotuses, and finally decides to give one of his eyes in exchange for that one missing lotus. Now, of course, this is mentioned in many of the texts, and it is interesting that Durga, of course, immediately, she is so impressed by his dedication that she says that you don't need to give me that one eye instead of the lotus. And she, of course, gives him that particular, I would say, blessing to be able to actually slay Ravana. Now, this story is very, very popular, but she said that it will only be possible not during this particular time. And this time, when she did it, this was the time of September, October. And that is why the time period of the Durga Puja changes, because this was one of the odd times in which this particular wish was fulfilled. And from that time onwards, they changed the timing of the puja. So this is a very interesting aspect, and that's why now we have this season in autumn when it started being uh, celebrated. So this is actually very much prevalent in UP, Bihar, and even in the north part of India. But I mean, I don't mean to say that it's not particularly done here, but most people in the north, especially, do celebrate the concept of Ram and Ravan and the story of Deepavali and Dashera. And that is exactly the whole idea of Ram Leela and, Ravan Dahan, which I'll talk about a little later. Next, please. So this is how we see her. Now, this is interesting. This is a puja which I saw last year. And uh, the iconography has also gone through a great change. Now, here I would like to show you that, of course, you see right in the center is Durga herself. And you see, of course, Mahishasur. And you see the lion. But on the side, both the sides, we see four figures. And it's very interesting that there is Lakshmi and Saraswati. And we can, of course, if we look closer, we can see the owl and we can see the goose. And then we have Kartik and Ganesh, the four children. Now, this is also based a lot on Eastern folklore. The Eastern folklore of married girls coming back home and spending time with their families. This is interesting because even when I used to go home to visit my mother, she would be so happy I've come home, and I would spend time with her, and she would really take care of me, mollycoddle, pampering, nurture. And the day I left, she always cried. And I think this is a very interesting aspect of Durga, of course, coming down. Uma is invited home to her parents' home right here in Bengal, Assam, Odisha, or on the earth from the Himalayas, where she's going to spend these beautiful 10 days with her children, who I suppose have got no school on, and they are here on a summer holiday. And obviously, the day she leaves, when, of course, the Visarjan takes place, she goes back, and that's what creates such a melancholy in the atmosphere. So this iconography is definitely also taken from the folklores. And when we look at the faces, again, I'll tell you about the background and the faces just a little later. Next, please. Ah. Now, while I was here, and I started roaming about. I was living very far from North Calcutta. I would just take a bus and go straight there, somewhere near, Havra station and that whole area of Sham Bazaar. And I would start walking. And I started discovering a lot of these old buildings. It had texts on it. And then I went for some heritage walks and I discovered some great stories. And one of the most interesting part of the story was that, in fact, these pujas did not even exist before the 16th century. And the interesting part is that today what we see around us has a great historical context with the landlords or the kings or the zamindars. So it would make sense to tell you a little about this. And this, I think the whole idea of puja was perhaps a need for the zamindars to assert and display political authority, financial stability, and administrative control over the ruled. Now, of course, the pujas were also referred to as the celebrations of the kings. And the kings, of course, in the olden days, only were able to become zamindars or landlords after that. It was still only reserved for the affluent class and only some of the people living in these large kind of homes in villages or small towns were able to have these ostentatious celebrations of Durga Puja, which helped the zamindars become more powerful, actually, and get a kind of a very interesting social change in Bengal. But it was only in a little later that we find that the puja also starts talking a lot about the development of the Brahminical deity. Please remember, as I mentioned, before that, these deities were very much connected to folklore, to the folk traditions, tribes, villages. In fact, the story of Durga, if I think of it, even Indus Valley talks about a mother goddess. When you look at seals of Kalibangan and things, but the concept and this kind of formation only happened after 16th century. And it was basically the landowners, or the little rajas as they were called, who were trying to get control. But so can we go to the next one, please? This is a very iconic picture. Unfortunately, this is the best print I could get. I have thanked a lot of sites and books from which I have scanned some pictures or picked up some of these pictures. I don't know how many can guess who this person is, but I'll give you a hint. This is the Battle of Palashi. No, no, not Plassey. It was called the Battle of Palashi. And it is after the Viceroy, Clive, Robert Clive, actually, as everyone knows, was able to win at the Battle of Plassey. And it is after this a very interesting thing happened. It was after the Battle of Plassey that uh, it was decided that it was the time when Nawab of Bengal, of course, had broken ties, and a lot of other political changes happened in Calcutta. And Clive had an Indian tutor and had a great friend and confidant whose name was Raja Nabakrishna Dev. I'm sure many people who are listening or are from Calcutta or Bengal or have read about it would know him. Now, Clive says, we have won the battle and I need to do a Thanksgiving. Now, that's very interesting. A Thanksgiving, okay. And where will we have the Thanksgiving? He said the best place would have been St. Anne's Church. But unfortunately, the church has got demolished during the siege of the city. Now, where do we have this? So Clive, of course, consulting his Indian advisors, and he is proposed of having a puja or a celebration in the house of Raja Navakrishna Dev. Next, please. Ah, an absolutely brilliant picture. Now, of course, part of a collection at the National Gallery of Art in London. Clive said, "Oh, wow, that's great. And what will we do?" He said, "Why don't you do a Thanksgiving?" Now, look at this. This is a very interesting thing happening. The British want to get closer to the Indians. And they said, "Oh, well, wonderful. And where will we have it?" He said, "In my house, in my Rajbari. And there we will have a Thakur Dalan. It is basically the little covered veranda, as you can see here, the pillars. And behind the pillar, you see the image, where we will be inviting uh, all these people, all our soldiers and our special VVIP women and men from the British Army. And I will make an offering on the feet of the Durga. Okay, very interesting. And he says, "But this will require a lot of money." He said, "Don't worry. I have been given a great reward by the East India Company, and I'm going to use this for this particular celebration. There is only one particular thing I need to tell you." So Mr. Dev says, "What?" He said, "One is that we will need a dance hall." So he says, "Dance hall?" "Yes, because I mean, you people have been doing the puja. But for us, along with puja, it's celebration because we've won this, we've seized the city. So we'll have not girls coming all the way from Murshidabad and from Lucknow. And that is how on the left side you see a dance girl. Well, dance girl was basically nachne wali, nach girl or nachne wali ladki. And the British, of course, owes everything, added to everything, and of course called Nautch girls. And from Nautch girls from Kanpur or Murshidabad. And that's exactly what happened. There was one more thing which just might cause a little bit of a flutter, but I will tell you, because it's part of historical text, is that this was also a place where ham and meat and wine and drinks was served. Now, that was very, very controversial. And in fact, people who are still following a lot of the North Calcutta pujas know that the family of Raja Nabhakrishna Dev has been denying this fact even till a few years ago, that there is nothing about this that we know. But anyways, that's a part of history, even if it was there. This was, and finally, the most important thing, placards were put everywhere. This is the first of the company puja. It was called a company puja. And this was a very interesting origin of this particular time. Next, please. And yes, here we have one more of these kind of pictures where you see the nut girls and you see the two Indian zamindars standing with the westerner and a lot of people part of the celebration. This is a very bad quality print, but will give you an idea. After all, this is much before the camera really takes over, and a lot of photographs, lithographs, and prints of pictures were made, and there were no photographs of this particular time. But things change, and there are a lot of stories about many pujas and private pujas happening in these homes of affluent people uh, during that particular time between 1600 and 1700. Next, please. This is, of course, the house of Raja Nabhakrishna Dev, which I visited a couple of years ago. And so it has got two sections. One section, of course, now closed, but they actually use the other section for their famous Vanadi pujas, which are still happening even today. These are the baris which are still used. And the reason I only showed you, these are large and very large mansions where you can actually have that feeling of thousands of people celebrating, the whole family together and actually celebrating in a very big way. There's music and the dark players, and there is all this food being cooked and lots of celebration. Now, today, of course, we live in nuclear homes and families, and many of us don't even live in joint families. But there are a lot of great things when we sit and, sort of reminisce what it would have been like. It also has a great memory for me because my house in Varanasi was on the bank of the river, and my great grandfather, of course, was a doctor in the British Army. My grandfather was a physician in the British Army. And we had a lot of British people coming home, and we had a temple in the house. And these kind of pictures remind me of that beautiful home where I've spent many summer holidays. And we were about 45 people at one time during pujas over there as well. Next, please. This, of course, the great marble mansion, whether it was this or it was uh, uh, Rabindranath's house, the Thakur Badi, all these kind of places were known for these large autumn pujas, as they were called. And they were initiated in the city at this particular time. Before that, we know that many of these were being done outside the city, areas like, Nadia and Murshidabad, or many villages had these large pujas. But because the East India and urbanization in the city of Calcutta, we see the concentration changing into Calcutta city itself. And along with it, only having a religious fervor, it had other roles to play, which I'm going to tell you very soon. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yes. So as you can see, this is a very, very interesting slide. It was in the year 1790. This is not definitely not sure whether this slide belongs to that particular event, but this looks more like a Rajbadi, some particular Badi Puja. But it's a beautiful black and white slide. And the reason only I'm showing you is do look at the images of not only Durga, but the lion also. Very stylized and graphic, more like a folk art. And this is a very important point I'm making. The initial potters or the idol makers were generally village folks, and they were using only the ideas that they had from painting pots or painting wall paintings or doing Bitti Chitra, is that those ideas were used to create these images, which were very, very different from images that we will see later on during the transition. Also, the backdrop, which is in this form of this art kind of a wall backdrop, was something used. There was actually a practical reason for it, to keep the images together. Otherwise, they would fall off. But they had other reasons for it, which I will explain to you. But it was in the year 1790 when a great thing happened. And it was actually uh, called the Baroyar Puja, when a group of 12 friends decided to collect some capital and do a kind of a congregational puja. And this particular Baroyari Puja was very, very important. But afterwards, the same thing got a name, which is Sarbujanin, as we use today, which means a publicly subscribed puja, when it was meant for the people, by the people, of the people, really, because it had public contribution, it had public participation, and it was controlled by them. And one of the very important ones, of course, which I just talked about, uh, went on, of course, in 1910 at Bagh Bazaar, but the first one in Kolkata, done much earlier in 1832. And this again created a kind of a unity amongst people. People were already suffering in the hands of the zamindar. People were already suffering in the hands of the British stranglehold. And it was just the perfect time to actually develop some kind of their own rightful power. And Durga Puja suddenly now ceased to be only an icon of celebration. It became more a nationalistic movement, which we realize happening in a big way in the 1800s, when Bankim Chatterjee actually writes Anand Mat. And Anand Mat, of course, and the whole influence of Anand Mat is seen at that particular time in the stories and in the poetry, which suddenly became popular in 1882. So when Anand Mat was written, it was serialized in a leading literary monthly in 1881-82 called Bengali. And in that, it depicted Durga as a patron deity for liberating India. The novel became so much a patriotic touchstone that the British soon banned the book. And it remained banned till 1947. But there were a lot of plays. 1900s, early 1900s saw a lot of Durga's plays happening. And even when Durga Puja happened, a lot of nationalistic songs were sung in the background. The same time, 1905, we see a very important event, the partition of Bengal, which created a very major Swadeshi campaign. And, and even, the titles on advertisements of that time said, nothing Bideshi, everything Swadeshi. And that is when, can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. So this is a very important Sarvajanan Puja was held here. And this was called the Congress Puja in 1926, happened in Maniktala. And this was a puja which was actually to talk about the puja and Durga actually standing more as a symbol of the power to actually, win over the freedom. And, it was something like a suppression of the British itself. Next, please. Yeah. So now I have some images to show you the different kinds of bodies. I mean, there are names and there are terms and there are many such pujas which are happening in different parts of the city called the Bonedi Pujas. So Shobha Bazaar, Bada Bazaar, there are many such even today. And they are absolutely stunning. Look at this also gives us your idea what kind of wealth these people had. and what kind of pomp and splendor in which they lived. You can see, you can see a great influence of Western culture. Even these wrought iron kind of pillars and these lampposts, can you imagine? Many of them were imported all the way from Calcutta. The reason I'm telling you this, I'll tell you in a minute. Of course, the architecture is very colonial. And next, please. So initially, when these pujas started, the Thakur Dalan of the veranda, and wherever the Thakur Dalans where the image and icons were going to be, they generally invited the image makers home. And these image makers came and stayed there for days. They would just bring a kind of a clay figures with them, and many times they even made them there. But generally, they brought the unfinished idols here. They were given food and lodging and provided a small place. I was very lucky. This is a picture I took last year at one of these pujas, and there is that smell of wet clay and straw, and these artists, as I would call them, although if you look closely, the artist has also grown modern. He's using a spray gun to paint the image. But there is a sense of cleansing. He is doing it like a spiritual part of his life. And that is what the most important part is. The artist doesn't remain an artist anymore. He is the one responsible for giving life to a divine form. And I think that is the most important part. Now, most of these traditional bodies still have, well, as you can see, a very, very folk or a traditional kind of imagery. The faces, the eyes, and you will see the change. Next, please. Look, and the funny part was we went in the morning, I'd taken a picture, and by the time we returned after seeing many such bodies, he had painted the head already, and he had painted the yellow parts, that beautiful yellow haldi Durga, or the turmeric Durga, the Durga for the rejuvenation, the brightness of Basant and the springtime. Because if I sit to tell you the different colors and iconography, unfortunately, Kuntal is going to kill me because we might go till midnight. But the interesting part is every color and every icon has a very important role. Okay. And here, this is, of course, a very important one. And here I must tell you about the great auspicious start of what we refer to as Mahala. Now, Mahala is one of the very important days, and we would say this is the point when Durga descends onto the earth. The reason why I'm telling you this is because it is on Mahala, which is just about a week before the puja. The eyes of the image are painted. A very interesting concept, and you might ask me why. Because they believe that that is the time she becomes alive, and so they generally, it is on Mahale, they paint the eyes, which is also referred to as the addition of the chakshu, or the chakshu puja or something like that. I'm not really sure of what its real term is, but what is interesting is, according to folklore, she begins her journey on that day. And it is particularly interesting. It's called Chakshudan, the Chakshudan. Now, it's also interesting. This is also the beginning of the Devi Paksh. Devi Paksh is the good time. It's just the end of Pitra Paksh. Many of you around the country might be understanding the meaning of Pitra Paksh, which is, of course, the time when the month of our mourning or our offerings to our ancestors is just gets over. And it is believed that this Devi Paksh is the beginning when Durga will come with her family, either on palki or a palanquin, a boat, an elephant, or a horse. So many times, when you go to a pandal or you see some images, you see her on an elephant, or you see her on a palanquin or the howdah. And that's the idea that she has started her descent. This year, a very interesting thing happened, because this year Mahala happened some time ago, nearly a month ago. And I was woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And there was this sound of Jago, Tumi Jago. And I said, what is happening? And that interested me, intrigued me. And I asked my husband, he said, well, this is Mahala, when a recording of All India Radio Calcutta by invocation of the goddess, which was done by Birendra Krishna Bhadra years ago, with the beautiful songs and mantras of Mahishasur Mardini was sung. He is no more, but the recording is played on Mahala at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was so amazing to hear. It was so soulful. And it is also very important because that is the time I came to know from my friends who have been very helpful to tell me many things about this webinar as well, that many people go to the river to bathe and do the final Pinddan, which is for their ancestors on this particular day. Next, please. Yes, the only reason I chose this particular one was to show you that in most of these uh, traditional pujas, one of the very important things was the ornaments. The ornaments that were generally shown over here are showing, of course, the attributes, whether it's the chakra, conch, which I already mentioned, but a lot of the jewelry. The jewelry at this time, which is the darker saj, which is basically generally gold. They do not use any other metal. If it is used, and most of these traditional homes have been using the same particular pure gold ornaments year after year. And these ornaments are removed before the Visarjan, of course, leaving only behind the more, I would say, eco-friendly elements like the cloth or even whatever other things which will sort of are, biodegradable. But the jewelry, of course, is kept very safely because it becomes more part of keeping part of the tradition going. This is jewelry which was, made for the pujas 100, 200, or even 300 years ago. So there are more than 30 or 40 such pujas in north of Calcutta, which still are embellishing the goddesses with real gold jewelry. A time of festivity, of course, seen in every part of the country, making alpanas or appan or rangoli or mandana or whatever you'd like to call it. You want to obviously dress up the whole area. You're welcoming the mother goddess, and she's coming for a very short visit. She's going to remain in our hearts. She's very much part of our temples or our mandir, but she's going to physically touch our hearts in these 9 or 10 days. And how much better can we do the celebrations? The whole family, families, the colonies, and everybody gets together. These are some of these beautiful visits to some of these traditional homes in the last few years. Okay, and many images, many different kind of unique images, many icons which are still, they look from another world. Because what you see today in most pandals or pandals or any of these places where you go, I have a different kind of look. The eyes were more bulbous, the figures look more graphic, they look more as if they were like terracotta images of, little statuettes, and they look very, very different. And that beautiful background which we can't forget. Next, please. I was very fortunate to meet some of the present generations of these old time families, and it was such a pleasure because they said that this is not only something we are doing for a celebration, they are part of something to continue a ritual, to continue something which has been in our lives, and it's part of our and the best part is these are open to all. So to tell any of you, if any of you are visiting Kolkata, please come during this time. There are beautiful walks and people can go and spend their whole days sitting and even sharing thoughts with them. Their purohits or their pandits or their particular, uh, you know, uh, uh, priests of each family comes and stays over there for days and days. And that is another very interesting part. They don't really go anywhere and they perform all the pujas.
The 9 days, of course, go in performing different kinds of aspects, right from laying down the kalash, or to putting bhogs or the food and offerings, or to dressing up the different aspects of Durga, or the different symbolisms and chanting of mantras. Next, please. This is again very interesting, and at the background is what I want to show you something. If you notice behind Durga, you will see a lot of images, and this was actually a kind of a storytelling. Can we go on to the next? Next one. Oh, can we go on to the one before that one? Sorry about that. The one before this. Yeah. So you see the arch at the back. It has images. It was called Chalachitra. A Chalchitra, of course, Sanskrit word, or in Hindi, the Chalchitra means a cinema or a picture or a film. And it was very important to have this kind of a semicircular decorative frame, which was generally on a wooden panel on a bamboo frame. And they used to have a lot of these narrative folk uh, images of other gods and goddesses, which are part of the Hindu pantheon, right from Shiva to Brahma to Vishnu to Durga's different kinds of attributes. And the whole idea of this was so that they could all be venerated or, revered at the same time. And many of these images varied from home to home, depending on what was their kind of favorite god. Now, this also I must tell you that apart from Durga Puja, every house has its own uh, kind of cult icon. It could be Krishna, it could be Shiva, it could be, and so they are also revered at the same time. And this concept of this kind of architectural lunette, as it's called in architecture, remained sort of from 1700s to really 1930s. And it was only after 1930s when single frames came up and the two sons and daughters came up. Before that, it was not necessary that even the whole pantheon was shown the way it is done today. Next, please.
It's all extremely beautiful. Now, on the left side over here, that's Ganesh. And next to that, you see this interesting kind of installation. It's as if a plant or a tree. Is it a? Oh, it is, of course. It is a banana tree wearing a sari. Now, you will all wonder what is a banana tree doing wearing a sari? The general notion, of course, is that it is supposed to be Ganesha's wife, but we'll wait to maybe know a little more about it. But you can see the whole Thakur Galan is completely embellished with different kinds of attributes, different kinds of pots and pans and flowers and fruits and the conch shell, and everything that's required for the complete 9-day celebration. Lot of regional things will change from the offerings, but traditionally when done, nobody will leave even a single thing. Next, please. This is another very beautiful place, and I had to take one of the chandelier, and one of the aunts who, of course, has seen this kind of puja for the last, she told me she was 70, and she had been seeing it for the last 60 years. She says she remembers 60, 65 years of the puja. And these are these amazingly well preserved. A lot of wealth has gone even in the preservation of these spaces. Next, please. To the bahus of the house right now. And this is interesting because these are the present generations, and they are the ones who are now the spokeswomen for these historical pujas. Look at the picture on the right. You can actually see the newspaper framed cuttings in the background talking about the famous pujas of these houses. And these are women who actually live in Baliganj or they live in their own homes. They come to these ancestral homes and spend the 9 to 10 days over here and actually performing those rituals which have been handed over from generation to generation. And she told me, she said, I would want to see my children, grandchildren carrying it forward. This is a legacy and it should not be cut suddenly or, have any kind of discontinuation. Dressed in that typical attire, they just look so beautiful. Look at this embellishment. This is their particular Thakur Dalan. All the jewelry is pure gold. She is completely covered with gold, and even the clothes and the fineries were pure silk. It was actually a very exuberant image. Look at her eyes, so awake, so alert, and she sort of has that kind of energy right visible on her face. Next, please. Or this repeat. We can go to the next. I just got a bit carried away with a lot of images to give you an idea. Next to on the pillars, you can see ancestral pictures. And many of these offerings already put every day. There is a whole set of offerings, or the bhog as it's called, the offering of food, flowers, naivedyam, jal, milk, fruits, grain, many such. And these, of course, will obviously change from home to home. Next, please. Next. Now you can already see the difference. This is a very present day picture, and the image has changed. More humanistic qualities. Durga's hair, Durga's eyes and face, or even the face of the other figures. There's a sense of even iconography changing and looking more realistic to a certain extent. Here, of course, the backdrop is still there, but it has become more like a stage set or a prop rather than just being behind the Durga itself. Next, please. The whole family gets involved in cooking. Food is such an important part. Most of you, I think, might have heard me saying earlier also, if you heard me, I'm a foodie. I love the part of food, and such a lot of amazing delicacies travel from north to south, east to west. Calcutta, I mean, whether it's aloo posto, it's ghugni, it's chingri posto, sandesh, rasgulla, just to name a few. I mean, I love the puja. And from a non-Bengali, I make it a point to eat all kinds of Bengali cuisine during this period. Even, biryanis, the real traditional offering. Oh my God. It is absolutely beautiful to have traditional food. It's time of celebration. It's time of eating with family and friends. Next, please. Yes, the traditional khichdi. Khichdi, of course, made with rice and lentil, which is generally the most important offering. And I think this makes it very clear to us. Many of the festival uh, celebrations in our country will always have offerings of rice or lentil and milk and butter. And the whole idea is that, like, spring came with the whole concept of uh, crops, cultivation, harvest. And of course, so this would be that we get a great harvest, and all of us get nicely, we can devour this, or we can enjoy our meals. We should always be nurtured with the blessing of Durga. And khichdi, of course, becomes a very symbolic aspect of that particular ritual. Next, please. I love this picture only is how beautifully, how artistic. I have to say, one of the most artistic aspects was the offering thals, as we call them, or the thalis. How beautifully everything is kept and done every day. Every day these offerings are made, and how traditional things still have such an amazing power of, connected to our roots. Next, please. Ah, I couldn't resist myself from putting pictures of the vegan bhaja and the mixed vegetables, or the shutto. And next, please. I think these we should carry faster before people's mouth starts watering. And the rasgulla, or the sandesh, or the payesh. And here, of course, one of the very, very dear places, dear areas, which I think a place which has always made me smile. It has made me cry. It's a place which is, I think, where it is the place which has given birth to the icons, Kumar Tuli. Kumar, of course, the word itself, the potter. The icon makers of Bengal have been making a living constructing these celestial images from Hindu pantheon from time immemorial. And what is interesting, it's not only making these images, but adding that kind of, as I said, invoking the divine reality into them. It is from year to year that they have not only made these images, but also they have got their helpers embellishing them with the painting or making a beautiful, sequin embellishment or shola peat reeds, tinsel colored papers, straw structures. So just a few images to show you uh, how once you go there, it's a beautiful sight from the time it is done, from the most basic aspect of icon making from straw to covering it. Now, this image will give you a better idea of the chalachitras I was talking about, the background. And look at the painting, look at the image of Durga. She doesn't look like a real human form. This is a very traditional form taken more from Attachitra. Attachitra is, of course, a folk art tradition. And in fact, most of these craftsmen were basically Attachitra artists who were later on adapted into this area around 1760, when it was the Bengali residents living around the Chitteshwari temple decided to actually start this concept of having the concept of black town. And then, of course, you have the black town where weavers and tailors and these Kumars live. And then, of course, there was the white town. Look at these images, will give you a very great idea of how these images are made. Again, taking a lot of, oh, that's me. And one of the images, while I talked to so many, uh, I can't stop myself from telling you that they embellish everything, but still today they are being deprived of some of their basic needs and requirements. They live in very, very unfortunately poor conditions. The government still needs to do a lot for them. And that is one of my biggest grievances when it comes to going to Kumhartuli. The left image is very interesting. Time from the time of the British itself, a lot of these mansions of the British in the White Town had these Apollo kind of images of Greco-Roman figures. Those were very beautifully adapted by the icon makers for the other figures, whether it was even the leonine figures or the demonic figures, making them very muscular. We see a lot of figures looking like Apollo over there. Oh, this is the puja here. Last year when I was here in puja, this is the beautiful, and went there before it was inaugurated. So the ribbon is still there. And, it was just downstairs where I live. And I got such a beautiful view of it. She seemed to be talking. They looked so real, so embellished. But the background now doesn't have the traditional chalachitra, but still that complete arched lunette still remains to be metaphorically sort of giving her that halo of being invincible. Next, please. The details are beautiful. Materials have changed. And here, now, this is the biggest attraction. When I started doing research, I had about 800 images of pandals, because don't forget, more than 4,000 to 4,500 only in Calcutta. And so if you think of all over the India, so for your own help, there are many websites. If any of you would like the link, I can send it to Kuntil, of only the beautiful pandal and pandal making. It's interesting, they began only as a kind of a canopied hall, which was called the pandal, which were basically a place where a kind of a tent in which they would make a podium and put the image. But as time passed on, and these became more important as not only a room or a house to keep the image, it also became important to use it as a kind of a storytelling. It became important to either depict stories or history or film or sci-fi or traditions and folk culture, and even up to issues of political aspect or social aspect. And demons started looking like Osama bin Laden after Twin Towers. And in fact, even making Twin Towers or making different kind of mythological aspects.
A lot of money is spent, but a lot of beautiful artistic techniques are seen. Here on the left, you see this one is beautiful. Um, it talks about the interest to keep our environment, to keep it eco-friendly. This is wholly made of clay pots. And that was a very important thing. Use biodegradable things. Um, make it more nature friendly, make it more user friendly, rather than use plastics and thermocol, which is something which is, of course, considered the worst part of making any of the pandals. Titanic. So, I think this is I remember I had a group when one of this, I think the Titanic film had just come out. And at that point, I had some friends over from the United States, and they literally started by laughing. They said, "My God, how does this connect to a puja?" And then, of course, the idea was that this now is not only a ritual, it's become a design. Design is something which has aesthetics, but has a utility as well. So here, this design is not that you're going to take a boat and move somewhere, but it was to show awareness towards things happening in the world, things which have been popular, things which we should be talking about. And it was also the fact that it showed us the aspect of being in sync with present, along with in sync with the past. And here, this is absolutely contemporary. As I talk, people are giving finishing touches to this particular one, not very far from my house, which is the very interesting puja at Barisha Club, where the artist has decided, he's Rintu Das, the artist, who decided to uh, give us this particular opportunity to understand the lives of the migrants during the COVID. And he says, I decided that Durga needs to look more like the migrant woman who moves from one place to the other in her very simple, her very, very feminine form with her children. You see Karthik in her arms, while there is Lakshmi and Saraswati. And best part is that it shows the strength of this woman during the COVID time, the migrant woman. What is also interesting, he was actually influenced by Bikash Bhattacharjee, who is an artist and who had made a painting many, many years ago of a laborer woman with a child. And if you can get a copy of today's newspaper, there's a whole story about it. This is what the whole thing looks like. And I think this is going to be quite a hit. It's very contemporary. It's again made only of bamboo. And I think that is one of the very important parts. Ganesh, of course, has been kept below on the line itself, as you see, below the pedestal. But of course, because Ganesha is also the harbinger of good luck, and I think that placement makes it very, very interesting. The three figures on the top, of course, looking extremely uh, simple, any day, everyday contemporary figures with a lot of pathos. There is a lot of pathos. But look at the faces, of course. Yeah, this is interesting. Now, this is uh, um, an image which was actually made during World War II. And Gopeshwar Pal, a very legendary idol maker, he broke away from traditions. He has always done that. Even in the past, he broke a lot of traditions to bring out the modern contemporary. Even this whole concept of having a five-figure Durga was his own doing. And there is a very interesting thing over here. Look at the figure on the right side. And he definitely, the demon here, or Mahishasur, should remind you of somebody. And I think this is going to be our quiz question today. I think Kuntil will tell you about the form later in which you should fill up who you think it is. And
Yeah, yeah. Just leave your answers in the chat box. We will
okay.
we will have a look at it at the end of the session. Who does Mahishasur, the way it's being portrayed reminds you of. Thank you.
Okay. Until you know what? We've I as usual are taking more time. I hope we can finish by 5.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Continue. No,
Okay.
no issues.
Let's continue then. Next one, please. This is again very interesting. This is the COVID virus, again being shown as Mahishasur. I think these are some amazing, unique, innovative ways of showing this. And so this is another a very interesting one. Next one, please. This again, this is a depiction of the COVID. And what I love is, look at this one. This is so wonderful. Durga Ji is shown with a mask, and she's got sanitizers in all her hands. I mean, how does an artist come up with such brilliant ideas? And this is made so environment friendly. They've just got masks all over, made with just bamboo and some shola peat work. This is a popular one. This is apparently what happened was that these were students from the College of Art here who decided to give this beautiful representation. I think this is really beautiful. So much for the time. I don't think I could have moved ahead without talking about these beautiful neon lights. Uh, I've seen these for many years. They move. I wish we had a video, we could have shown you how they move. And I didn't realize till last year, I visited two of the very interesting colonies at the time of the French and the Danish. Chandanagar. Can you imagine? Chandanagar is one of the most important places of the origin of these beautiful neon installations. They not only add to the drama, it's a very innovative and a very, very taxing kind of way of making these with light bulbs and still being able to bring out the context of the time. Cuttack is another city in Orissa which has some of these most brilliant light artists, as they are called. And they take months and months to prepare these images, which of course will become dramatic as they move with the neon lights, giving it a completely animated version. And unfortunately, this year things are going a little low, as we all know. But I hope I can get a glimpse of a couple more in the next few days. Next, please. The time for dance, drama. This year, of course, not major celebrations are happening, but I have seen a lot of these dance performances. This one I saw last year at Rajbari Bawali, where they had this beautiful presentation. But every year, lots of dramatizations of these kind of storytelling from this great tale of Mahishasur Mardani come into action on stage for people to enjoy, to revel, and to also understand and respect the woman power. Next, please. Lots of happening, lots of celebrations, community celebrations. Next. So if you are in Calcutta, two things, of course, the loudspeakers and the dhak. The drumming is, I think, a catalyst. It brings about that energy. I don't think we can enjoy the puja without these drums, the dhaks and the players, and that beautiful rhythmic play. It actually starts reminding me, sometimes I imagine the Tandav also of Shiva, the Natraj. This whole thing, as we said, that as he performed the Natraj, became the Nataraja, and as he performed the cosmic dance, the whole earth moved. And that is why the damru becomes his cosmic music, the instrument, which actually makes that wonderful noise of the whole earth shaking. I think this is so vibrantly, dhak goes with the Durga and the goddess. And I think that is so important to show you, even an image, if not the sound. Next, please. So remember, we saw that beautiful image of when I told you that is Ganesha's wife draped up in a sari next to him, the banana tree. Well, this particular aspect is called the kola bau, or the banana bride. And It's a very interesting aspect which happens on Septami or the seventh day. But in this case, it's not only the banana. This is called the Navapatrika, where 9 trees or parts of 9 trees, colocasia, haldi or turmeric, pomegranate, rice, jayanti, wood apple, aram, and ashoka are all wrapped together. And in fact, this is a symbol of the 9 forms of Durga. And this is what is a very interesting part for you to know. And so I just wanted you to understand that this is particularly referring to that uh, particular ritual. And then it's wrapped with the sari and taken. Or this whole concept of the Ghat Sthapana. Ghat Sthapana is actually what even in Bihar, UP, everywhere is of the placing of this kalash. And of course, it is with mango leaves and Durga represented by that fresh coconut on the top and the coronet of the mango leaves. These are beautiful symbols, or the beautiful effervescence of the lamp lit, or the incense. All these are so much part of the last 5 days of reverence and scripture recitation, or the Durga Mahatmya, and finally, of course, Sindur Khela before we have. So now, it's interesting to tell you about some other regions in India, because India is diverse and multicultural. And in spite of having different traditions and practices and rituals, we do have a lot of ceremonies during this particular time in different parts of the country. This one generally seen a lot in the south. It does happen here too, and it even happens in the north. In UP, it happens. It is basically worshipping uh, all your instruments. Actually, it's called the Ayudha Puja, which basically means weapons, swords, knives, and all the things. It's basically because Durga uses so many weapons as part of her being the warrior goddess. But it's interesting, it has different names in different places. In Kerala, of course, the Ayudha Puja, but it's not only tools. It also has occupational implements. Saraswati Puja is also done. Pens are worshipped, instruments are worshipped, musical instruments, books are worshipped, and that is what is very interesting. So just wanted to show you one of this especially. Ah, so uh, not that, but if you live in the north, this will be more like what the Shera Wali Ma, and it is in Punjab and Delhi or Haryana or other parts of north, where you see the Navratri or the Navratri, and where you generally see Ma Shakti in this particular form. Of course, you still have the Mahagauri and Katyayani on the sides, but her image looks a little different from what we saw in Bengal. She's dressed a bit differently. Of course, her attributes are there. Her lion can also be a tiger, by the way, iconographically a tiger or the lion. And of course, over here, she is celebrated in a very, very different way. So again, 9 days. They also celebrated twice a year during the Basant or the springtime and during the Sharad time, which is now. Next, please. Can we go to the next? Again, dressed up. And if you look on the one on the left side, she's wearing a lot of these attributes. She's got kaliras in her hand, which are very much part of the Punjabi tradition. Or in the right one, which is from Maharashtra, where she wears that traditional nose pin. So you see, the thing is that Durga is, art is a representation of us. Imagery or even iconography changes with regions. People want to use things which they use to make her their own. And that is why you see that whether it is headgears or it is jewelry, it changes from region to region. And devotees will, families will devote, getting new clothes made for them. There are new kinds of dresses made for them, and poshak as it's called. And of course, the celebrations begin. Next, please. Uh, Navratri again,
In North, especially, it is about a lot of fasting, 9 days of fasting, remaining totally vegetarian. That is a very interesting difference from North to many other parts of the country. And of course, performing the lighting of 108 lamps. Now, this is interesting. It is somewhat like the 108 lotuses, but here it is the lamps. Next, please. Uh, the mother goddess has been worshipped, will continue being worshipped, and this is called the Kumari Puja, as it's called even in the East. It is called the Kanjak Puja, where a lot of these beautiful 9 young girls are honored. Um, this is generally performed on the 8th and the 9th day when they're given these beautiful red garments or the chunnis, chunni chadhate hain, or whatever it's called, and they are fed, offered food, their feet are touched, they are revered. The young girls, basically, they are not older girls. This concept of worshipping 9 young girls has been coming down from time immemorial. They're considered to be the 9 avatars, and that is why the Nav Kanyas, and they are, that is again a very important part of Punjab and Delhi and Haryana. Next, please. Typical offering of chana, or the black chana or gram, and halwa and puri. Halwa, of course, is the sweet, and the puri is made with this. This is a very traditional offering to the mother in the north, and that is what is offered to the Kanjaks or the girls as well. Next, please. Mata Ki Chauki and Jagran, singing hymns, dedicating songs, dedicating beautiful musical evenings and nights, especially the Ratris, the Navrat. So Ratris are especially Rat Jagas, or people stay awake. And people, especially, there are groups who come and perform this amazing music dedicated to the Durga or all the other forms of the mother goddess. And they are generally referred to as Jagrata, or they are referred to as Mata Ki Chauki. Next, please. If any of you have been to the Himachal Pradesh, of course, the picture only gives us the details through the caps that the men are wearing. Himachal Pradesh, it is called the Kullu Dashera. And Kullu Dashera, of course, has been coming down for a long time during 16th century. It's basically, they carry out these images on palanquins, and their worship is to Lord Raghunath. Raghunath is another name for Lord Rama. And the stories are, of course, very interesting of how one of the kings, Jagat Narayan, goes all the way to Ayodhya and actually steals an image. He gets it stolen, actually, the image of Raghunath. When the Ayodhya people try to take it back, it becomes so heavy they can't carry it. But when the Kulu people carry it, it's very easily comes back. And well, there are many folklores. And this is the time when they revere all gods and goddesses on palanquins, taking them to offer their offerings to Lord Raghunath. It's a beautiful 1 month of celebration. It's actually wonderful, lot of celebrations, but it's also connected to a lot of fairs, as they're called, mela. There's a lot of dressing up and music and dance by the local people of Himachal in that area. Looking at this, it's very easy to understand. We are talking about Gujarat. On the top, you see what is called, both the pictures show you Dandiya. All right, Dandiya, which is basically the sticks which are used to create a choreographed dance performance on music. Now, I don't know how many of you ever observed the fact, or well, things have changed in time. The Dandiya is always performed on songs which are basically songs of devotion, because the Dandiya is a form of a dance which actually symbolizes the fight of Durga to Mahishasur, while she uses the sticks to kill him. Now today, of course, these are synchronized dances on in lots of these large areas or terraces and gardens and lawns where people perform this choreographed dance. But it is more a performance done for fun and community coming together. But let's go to the next one. But this is called Garba. In Garba, they generally don't have any kind of sticks, but they perform a choreographed dance again. Can we go to the next? Yes. And if any of you look carefully in Gujarat, Maharashtra,
or even parts of Madhya Pradesh, you will notice this kind of a pot kept in the center with a lamp. The pots can have different variations, but this is what is how the term Garba comes. Garba is not a dance form. It is a Garbha dance. Garbha means the womb, and the life of it comes with the light. Durga symbolizes the life she puts into our lives. It is the dance which is performed around a clay lantern. And it is the Garbha or the womb lamp, which is the fetus in the womb, which is the life that she gives to us. So the dancers basically honor Durga, the feminine energy for divinity. The performance is generally done in a circular fashion. And they create many cycles of people. If you've seen, there are many, many cycles, which mean cycles of life, birth, and rebirth. And that is why it is referred to as Garbha, and how the term Garba dance has come off as to being. So this is something I really wanted to share with you. Next, please. This is again the same. They also perform these kind of beautiful Deepak dances. These are also Garba, which they are holding on their heads. This is mostly seen in Madhya Pradesh. This is from Indore actually. And many such forms of carrying imagery also of Durga on the head are prevalent in the West. Next, please. Okay. In UP, we've done a lot of this, UP and Bihar, taking smaller images of Durga, and after Sindur Khela, which also happens there, taking them to the coast. These happen also in the eastern part of the country, but these are individual smaller images, which I have also seen here in Calcutta. A lot of people carrying these home. I saw the other day, and potters making these beautiful images, which people will go and actually immerse personally on the Dashera day or the Vijayadashmi day, the 10th day. Next, please. This is something which was done in my house. My mother always grew barley. This is a very interesting ritual which comes from the time when Navratri was performed during the springtime. The idea was or barley was grown in every household. And in the next 9 days, they would see how much it grows. This grows very fast. And the interesting part was that when it was done, they would put a coconut in the center of it and then rever it as Durga, who is the harbinger of great crop. There is a very interesting story connected. If the crop did not grow properly, if your wheat turned black or your barley turned black, those houses were considered to be the ones which would be inauspicious in the coming time or would have bad luck. I do not wish to believe that. But I remember feeling very, very happy and clapping when it started growing, and the green part would start coming out. They start sprouting, and I remember clapping hands, and the whole house would say, "Oh, the crop has started growing." And I remember my mother carrying this on her head exactly like this many, many years ago, and taking it to the most important temple of the Durga temple on the Ghat in Banaras, and then performing the rituals. Next, please. When I talk of Banaras, the Ram Leela cannot be forgotten. For me, Dashera and this whole Navratri, I grew up watching Ram Leela. And in Banaras, the interesting part is it begins actually on the other uh, bank of Banaras called Ramnagar. There it started from the Maharaja's home, where the first episode would start. Interestingly, the audience moved with the Ram Leela, and the Ram Leela going through the Khands from Sundar Kand to Kishkinda Kand to Lanka Kand to change their locations. And it was fun because we moved with it. And for all those days of the 2 weeks before the Shera, we would watch all this happening in different parts of the city. And that was the beautiful part. The story builds up for you. You build up with the characters. You start, treating them as heroes. And this is the last time before the Shera is going to be when Ram is going to finally slay the demon Ravan. Next, please. This is more what we see happening in a lot in the north, especially with Shera. And something I celebrated a lot when I was a child. As we've grown older, it's more of just knowing about it. There are no more fairs. There are no more village fairs. Yes, we do have the city Ramleelas, but they are not as fun as what I remember as my childhood time. Next, please. This is from South India. It's so easy to even look at the images and understand that this definitely comes somewhere from Mysore Dasara and the Basra Festival. The image is completely South Indian in flavor. The more you look at art, the more you start understanding the regional flavors of these. Next, we can keep moving. Yes. Those who are from South India, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, know about the Bommai Golu. Bommai Golu, of course, is this beautiful aspect, also called the Court of Toys, the Doyle Festival. And in this, of course, it is this divine presence of placing dolls on this, of our multitude of gods and goddesses on different levels. And what is very interesting about this is that these steps are generally in odd numbers, and there's generally 9, showing the 9 levels of Navratri. And on the 10th day, these Golu dolls are generally put to sleep. There is always a ceremonial kalash or of course, along with the rest of the celebration, just like anywhere else. But what is amazing is this beautiful display in people's home, and they, it is more like putting your toys and celebrating. It's like a birth. So all the toys and the whole Hindu pantheon is out there, and it's a beautiful display, which I personally have only seen in a few friends' homes, but have never actually done it myself, but I've seen it. So this is something very interesting coming from southern part of India. Some more of the same. And you can see, yes, look at these. These images are totally different. How beautiful. These are generally carved in southern part of India. You see them in Tamil Nadu. Many of them come from Karnataka, and many of them also from the areas of Andhra Pradesh. Next, please. We cannot definitely finish talking about Navratri without talking about the Basra festival in Mysore, which King Raja Wadiyar started in 1610 with the great Mahanavami festival. And this is the actually one of the scenes of the invocation of the Durga, the Chamunda, as we know her there. And this is the Chamundeshwari invocation being done inside the palace. Next, please. The beautiful Howrah, as it's called, Howrah or the golden saddle, carrying the beautiful gods and goddesses, especially Chamundeshwari, a very, very important part of this particular event. Next, please. This happens in Kerala, where they actually build these beautiful kind of circular uh, uh, pounds of flowers, which again depict the coming of Durga. So in every place, Sharad Navratri or Vijay Dashmi is celebrated in such beautiful ways. Everyone dresses up, and there is a lot of reverence. The women very much involved in most of them, as you can see, and these are beautiful sights. Next. Sindoor Khela, a very interesting one. Of course, I can see my family and friends here. These are very personal pictures which I wanted to share. And Sindoor Khela, interestingly, started during the 16th century, as only when it was performed in the zamindar homes, there were many women. And because joint families had different bahus, there would always be, some of them would always be having fights, and they would be having differences. So Sindoor Khela was also a way to bring about a kind of camaraderie and friendship among them, as the folklore say, that, they must learn to become more happy with each other. But now, of course, as we see, Durga is, of course, and this is very nostalgic. The day I always came back from my mother's home, she would apply sindoor first to me, then to herself, and then to the goddess, and then she would bid adieu to me. It is interesting how this tradition of the daughter continues with Sindoor Khela, as we will see in the next few slides, because they will first put it on the Durga. In the background, you see the women all putting sindoor on Durga and then putting it to themselves and then going for the Visarjan, which is on, this is performed, of course. And there we are, as we bid adieu to Durga on Vijay Dashmi. She has, of course, uh, actually fought all the battles. We, in fact, symbolic of the battles that we have to fight against ignorance and evils. And then she will gradually go back into the water, going back to Mount Kailash, and we bid her adieu for her to come back. Now, it's funny because I've actually got tears in my eyes as I speak to you, because this is a very, very emotional moment. And imagine this is going to happen in every part of the country. And this is not something that is just a practice. It suddenly will touch your hearts and touch your minds and souls. And we wish that we could also, in our own lives, uh, fight against these evils and continue with just a very little bit of the Durga that we might be able to have within us. So I know I have taken so much extra time, but as I read this, every woman who awakens courage within herself is Durga. Every woman who awakens transformation within herself is Kali. Every woman who awakens devotion within herself is Parvati. Every woman who nurturing within herself is Annapurna. And every woman who awakens the Shiva within herself is Shakti. So I just want to read something to you, that just like Ma Durga, women in India are powerful, sensitive, righteous, and courageous. India is still fighting the societal demons, the crimes against women, like rape, abuse, domestic violence, and even child marriage. We worship our goddess, but we tend to forget the respect, the spirit of those deities in our girls and our women. You know, there's a very interesting social quote on which I will end. A country with the highest crime rate against women are now worshipping a woman for the next 9 days. So let us learn something from this and let us try to change the way we look at women, the way we treat women, and let us all come out more victorious and better people in life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Seema. That was a wonderful journey you took us today, right from east, west, north, south. It was brilliant. I hope everybody enjoyed as much as I did. Uh, thank you for joining in today. Thank you, Seema, once again so much.
I hope
I
no one can
think
see my tears because
I think
I
you
get
got
very, very emotional.
emotional.
And I wish all of you a great festival time wherever you are, whether you are in south, north, east, west, or even people outside the country. I think this is something which should be on your bucket list also. But otherwise, we can all celebrate Durgashtami at home in our hearts. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and happy Durga Puja to you and your entire family.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, Durga Puja wishes to everyone, Navratra wishes to everyone. Thank you for joining in. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a very interesting webinar. A lot of you have been wanting webinars on sports. So tomorrow we have a webinar on the history and the evolution of Indian cricket. So don't miss. Devendra Prabhudesai is going to take us on a journey. Um, History and evolution of Indian cricket. Thank you for joining in today. Please fill in the poll before leaving. It helps us to get better, give your feedback. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Bye bye. Stay safe. Stay healthy.